What's going on, humans? And welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Today's a two video kind of a day because I am a little behind on the MGM series that is brilliant. It's called Beyond UFOs and The Unknown. And episode 3 is my favorite up until now. And that's a lot to say because the other two were absolutely brilliant as well. The biggest highlights for me were J. Christopher King, who opened up about his experiences, and I think that was very brave of him. So kudos to Jay. But the part that interested me the most is something that I talk about in this channel quite a bit, and that I spoke about with Professor Stephen Brown when he was recently my guest on Psicoactivo for the second time. He is doing an initiative that is called the Visible College. They have a Twitter account and everything. And I already knew of someone who was doing something similar, but I hadn't heard him call it that. He did in this series. I am obviously talking about Professor Jeffrey Kripal, who is one of the people that I admired the most in this topic because he knows that our potential abilities, or what we are capable of, is intimately connected to the phenomenon. And I love how they highlight what he's doing in the university where he teaches, where he keeps the famous archives of the impossible, which is an initiative he had of documenting physically every single aspect you can think of about the phenomenon. This obviously includes experiencers, which is like the biggest highlight, but it also includes a lot of experiments, a lot of documentation, like pretty much everything you can think of. The weirder, the better for Professor Kripal. So, and I have a dream to someday go visit and maybe interview him over there. That would be really cool. And I hope I can get to do that someday. But they also talk about how important this Invisible College initiative was when Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Valleé restarted it, because this episode goes a little bit into the history of this concept of the Invisible College. Dr. Jacques Valleé explains it brilliantly. And I have a small clip for you guys where people talk about Professor Jeffrey Kripal's influence into this, his work in Archives of the Impossible, and Dr. Jacques Vallée's explanation of the Invisible College. So here's the clip right here.
Jeff Kripal is one of the chief forces within academia today, fostering this change. His academic credentials are impeccable. Jeff was formerly the chair of the Department of Religious Studies at Rice. Today, he's an associate dean. And Jeff has opened up a whole intellectual landscape within academia, which previously was very, very limited.
The first thing I want to say or claim is that the impossible constitutes the deepest secret of human creativity and culture. The Archives of the Impossible is named after a book I wrote called Authors of the Impossible. I was in Berkeley, California with a gentleman named Jacques Valleé, and Jacques asked me to help him place his papers and case studies in a university archive because he was becoming concerned about their future.
You know, we live in a world where all computer data is fungible. I have correspondence with 1,000 people around the world studying this problem, going back over 50 years. Shouldn't we save it somewhere?
Jeff Kripal sent me a letter, I guess about 10 or 15 years ago at least. And I thought, how interesting, a professor from a big prestigious university on the level of Harvard. And suddenly in there is the Archives of the Impossible.
Ed May donated a lot of the remote viewing material. Then Whitley Strieber donated about 5,000 letters, and it just kind of sucked things in from there. Will this collection help future researchers connect the dots?
Are you familiar with the term invisible college?
Well, so first of all, the invisible college is an old term. It arises in the 17th century among British Protestant intellectuals who are studying science. And they know darn well that if they say out loud what they're thinking, they're going to be in big trouble.
Science as we know it really came out of a group of enlightened scientists, most of them noblemen because they had the luxury of their own opinions and their own fortunes behind what they did, who essentially took a position that was somewhat antagonistic to the church position. The position of the church was that many of the phenomena of nature belong to God, and you're not capable of understanding those phenomena. You're not supposed to open somebody's body to look at how their heart is beating. And you're not supposed to ask questions about the stars because the stars are a mystical thing. These physicists and biologists in England conspired to study those things together and to put money behind the research and to start publishing their research independently of the church. And they called themselves the Invisible College.
It was essentially a group of intellectuals who thought and studied things that were not supposed to be thought or studied. In the 1970s, Jacques wrote a book called The Invisible College, and it was about a group of intellectuals and scientists who were studying UFO topics and parapsychological topics.
So that was the new Invisible College because they were a college of researchers that were not publicizing their work. And Dr. Hynek thought that by then there were, maybe 12 or 15 of us in different countries, certainly some of the leaders in French science, biologists like Dr. Chauvin, the physicists like Costa de Beauregard, who worked with Einstein, were vitally interested in the UFO reports, and we were discussing it together. Most of them would not admit publicly or to a TV station and so on, wouldn't come forward and say they were interested in UFOs.
Invisibility is just a kind of code for we're going to do this in a secret fashion because we can do more.
These extreme anomalous experiences, which are not supposed to happen but do all the time, lie somewhere close to the well springs of human civilization in its various modes.
I consider the project here to be the visible college. I want to make the invisible visible. I want to mainstream it. I want to do it in a much more public and much more explicit way.
Today, more and more philosophers recognize that there are aspects of the mind that even if they are correlated with things that are happening in the body or happening in the brain, that they're not reducible to these things. They are something more. It's amazing to me, honestly, the way that academia has evolved in the last 10 or 15 years. This conference, setting the tone for how people engage with this. One of the really valuable things that Jeff Kripal is doing is providing this very safe place to explore further beyond the bounds of current science and current explanation and try to figure out what is going on.
I'm very grateful that I'm still alive at my advanced age to see a transition.
Our only way of thinking about these stories was not thinking about them. Oh, that person drank too much alcohol, or that person was on LSD, or that person was hallucinating. I mean, there's just this easy kind of explanations that actually explain nothing. And so I got really interested in why intellectuals don't think about those experiences, which presumably lie at the core of a lot of basic religious beliefs.
Up there, I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
And it looked what sort of...
Silent, and it looked dark, like black or gray in the middle, and it wasn't a helicopter, and it wasn't a balloon, and it was so near.
Has this been a hard transition, exploring this subject matter as an academic?
I teach at Rice. Rice is a very STEM-oriented institution. Most of my undergraduates are going to be engineers or chemists or maybe doctors. They're very science-oriented. And when I started to teach comparative religion here, I was using kind of classical religious texts, and I realized they were dismissing all of them. And they were dismissing them because they would say to themselves, oh, this person doesn't know science.
Well, let's say this Twinkie represents the normal amount of psychokinetic energy in the New York area. According to this morning's sample, it would be a Twinkie 35 feet long, weighing approximately 600 pounds.
That's a big Twinkie.
So I shifted and I started to use the anomalous experiences of scientists and engineers and medical professionals.
Anomalous experiences. In other words, something that science can't explain.
Yeah.
This is essentially what you've termed the flip.
Yeah. A scientist or an engineer is trained in a very materialist worldview where there's only matter, and the mind or consciousness is some sort of accidental byproduct of dead matter behaving in very complicated ways in our brain. So mind is essentially not real. What the flip is when a scientist realizes that, oops, actually mind is fundamental, and matter is actually some kind of expression of mind or consciousness. And so they have this complete flip of orientation, usually from a near-death experience or a psychedelic experience or an illness. I mean, there's a lot of things that will flip an intellectual or a scientist. But once they're flipped, they're flipped.
Yeah. I think that's, to me, this is what rings true the most. Us having a new understanding of reality, of what we can potentially achieve. And this ties into Dr. Grinberg's ethos, which was trying to understand the experience of reality. But from a different perspective, not from the materialistic reductive perspective, which we have been tied to for generations now, ever since Newton and then Einstein. And I know that we're eventually going to have that paradigm shift. And when that comes, Einstein's general theory of relativity will change into something new, something different. When the paradigm shift comes, all aspects of life are going to change. It's not just going to be like, yes, UFOs are real and that's that. No, philosophy is going to change. Psychology is going to change. Pretty much everything in academia is going to change. And Professor Kripal's initiative here is at the very helm of this future and incoming paradigm shift. I truly believe that. And I also want to point out that one of the main pioneers of this was Dr. Grinberg, because he was one of the very first from the 20th century actual scientists who tried to conduct experiments and to understand the nature of reality through experiments and through his theory, the synergic theory, which I'm sorry, but to me, it's one of the most complete about the nature and the experience of reality. And I think that Dr. Kripal already spoke with my good friend, Dr. Alex Gomez-Marin, a couple of times, actually. He was actually at the Party Center a few months ago with Alex, and they spoke about all of this. Archives of the Impossible, this new paradigm that we're approaching, and is very, very endearing to me that somebody as important as Professor Kripal is taking the lead on this. And I can only hope that I can get to talk to him someday. But also, I think that Professor Stephen Brown is already, I think, in contact with Professor Kripal. And probably they've already spoken about all of this, because they do have similar careers. And I think that one of the best ways to approach the phenomenon is through both philosophy and the understanding of all religions and how they have interacted with the phenomenon throughout history, because that is definitely real. It has happened and it keeps happening. Not all of them are acknowledging it, and right now, as I told you guys, we're living through a reductive materialistic paradigm. It is going to end eventually, but we still have a lot of work to do in order to get people who are not even aware of any of this to look our way, you know? So I want to thank Professor Kripal for sharing this, and I want to hear your thoughts on what do you think about the Archives of the Impossible? What do you think about this new Visible College initiative, which is happening all in different places, you know? It's not, and it's very similar to the Invisible College because it is merely a concept. It is not an institution. It's a concept that the more people who take the initiative to be part of it, the easier it will be to keep this in the open and help people understand that all of these things are real and are happening. And our perception and our capability to perceive things and to experience things is way more complex than we imagined. And the faster we get to understand that, the quicker it will be for us to learn about these skills. I truly believe that. So let me know what you think. And if you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe. We're like 20 or 15 subscribers away from 10,000. I want to thank everybody for the support. Hit the bell icon, share the content, comment, and like it, please. If you want to support the channel in any other way, I'm going to leave a few links in the description so you can take your pick. Whatever help you bring our way, it's always appreciated. So thank you. And yeah, just let me know what you think about this clip and what do you think about Professor Kripal's initiative of the Visible College and the Archives of the Impossible. If you didn't know about them, you got a lot of homework to do because Professor Kripal's work is truly, absolutely brilliant. He has a book called The Super Humanities. He has the Archives of the Impossible. Pretty much everyone working on the phenomenon from an academic and scientific standpoint works with him. He's one of the most important people right now doing all of this. So take a look at his work. I'm going to leave links in the description to all of his work so you can check it out. I highly, highly recommend it. Take the time. It's going to be worth it. I promise. And without further ado, I'll see you guys until tomorrow's video. Bye.